Good evening, everyone. I'm Yamina Pirzada, and I will be hosting this panel discussion today titled Drink Your Milk: Poems about our bodies, our voices, and who controls them. But before we start, I'd like to thank Wow Karachi for giving us the opportunity to talk about a topic so close to our hearts. And through this platform, we hope to reach a much wider audience. Today, I'm really excited to be sharing this space with these four dynamic women, and I will now introduce my guests to you. So, today we have with us Amna Sheikh, who needs no introduction. She's a renowned award winning actress, also an advocate for education and human rights. Then we have Rimal Moyuddin, who is a human rights activist and a writer, and currently working as the South Asia campaigner for Amnesty International. Then we have with us Kaval Ahmed, who is an entrepreneur, an activist, a talk show host, and also the founder of Soul Sisters Pakistan, which is a Facebook community dedicated to give voice to South Asian women. And finally, Bemisal, an artist with tons of opinions and a body image advocate and researcher. Thank you for being here. And before we start, I would like to show all of you our first animated poetry film titled Milk. And trigger warning, it has some explicit language and sexual violence. But now we'll play Milk by Elsa Sajad.
It's 2003 and my mother tells me to drink my milk. It's good for you, she said. It'll make your legs longer, your nails stronger, and your hair as smooth as silk. Drink every drop. Don't stop till you reach the bottom of the glass. You'll be at the top of your class. It'll make your brain sharper, your concentration better. Just remember to finish your milk. Have some cake with your birthday cake, she said. You're getting older, there's less room for mistakes, she said. Milk is what your body desires now that you're older, stronger muscles are what you require. Your teeth need to be pristine, they better shine and gleam, be as spotless and squeaky clean as that glass of milk. I list the benefits of milk in my head. That's all I can think of as his hands worm their ways down my thighs. How stupid was I? In that moment, I hate milk. I hate milk for making me tall. Screw you, milk. Why'd you make me tall? Tall but not strong enough to throw him off me, not smart enough to figure a way out of this mess. Fuck you, milk. This is all your fault. No, actually, it's capitalism's fault. Capitalism and false advertising. I lay there despising my mother for investing in milk cartons instead of karate classes. I blame myself next. Girls who are raised to drink their milk should be safe at home studying, not spread out on someone else's sofa wondering if their friends would consider this session of inappropriate touching sexual harassment. Or would they just shit on her for exaggerating? My mother always told me to drink my milk, but not even milk could help me fight the battle that was to follow. Unwilling to swallow the harsh pill of reality, I took out all my rage for what happened to me on dairy, too afraid to blame the patriarchy because it's easier to stop eating cheese than it is to convince men to be decent human beings. It's 2018 and I finally realize it's not the milk I despise but the sparkle in my mother's eyes when she spends hours talking to me about nutrition, homework, and exercise. Delusional that that's all being a good parent means, but she doesn't talk about how the means to my destruction would be the lack of knowledge that harassment happens and it's not my fault, how my consent should be held in the highest regard, and how rape is real. It is so real. I think about the future a lot. How I want a daughter, and I want her to be strong and tall. But most of all, I want her to know there are things more important in life than knowing the benefits of milk.
So that says a lot. But in this poem, like, yeah, I mean, she talks about so many different things. But what I wanted to start off with, and my first question was about body image. That since in our society, so much emphasis is on physical beauty for a woman. I think in a way, milk also symbolizes with fairness, like as white as milk. So now I wanted to ask you, Kaval. I wanted to start with you that since I've watched your web series Conversations with Kaval, and I felt that you'd interviewed a lot of people facing different issues related to body image. There was colorism, dwarfism, differently abled, wheelchair bound. I wanted to ask you that how do you think society perceives them, and what were your observations? Is that because it's not, a certain type, um, that you look different or with that body? How do you think society views them?
I think, I mean, first of all, I'm completely blown away by the poetry. I think it was just out of this world and it's a brilliant production. I, you know, the one thing that's common in the videos where of conversations with Kaval is what you just pointed out, that society didn't accept any of these people just because we have a certain definition of beauty. And I think we've talked about it so many times through different avenues like Twitter, through magazines. We talk about these things, but it still exists. You still see a girl who is darker than what you would want your ideal color to be, and people are quick to point it out that, oh, इसको बोलो कि दूध और हल्दी का पेस्ट लगा के मुंह पे रगड़ ले. Turmeric and milk is a very common remedy that's passed around, or honey and milk. Give her honey and milk. Or when a baby is being born, don't drink Pepsi, drink milk or drink coconut water. These are things that are so commonly and so casually passed around that we don't even realize that we're so drenched in discrimination and discrimination of all kinds, specifically physical discrimination. So and I think that of course a lot of it has to do with colonialism and all of the history, and I wouldn't want to go into that, but I think that the fact that it still is there in 2021 has a lot to do with us as well. I think we all play a part in promoting the same culture and ensuring that it doesn't come to an end, and we do it through various means. We do it through our participation in the media, we do it through our own conversations, sometimes even amongst friends, where we end up saying the most hurtful, most discriminatory things within Facebook groups, on Twitter, on Instagram. I mean, there's lots of things that we could argue about, right? That, oh, like this makes me feel a certain way. And I think that we're all missing out on one thing, which is empathy. We've stopped looking at things from other people's perspectives and thinking about how it affects them when we behave a certain way. So I think this lack of empathy and only looking out for ourselves is kind of why we're still in this position today.
You mentioned, like you mentioned, even media and the portrayal of a woman. I wanted to ask you, Amna, since in our dramas and films, do you feel, of course, it is a glamorous industry, but that we have a certain body type for the heroine, and we show this one body type in a very desirable way and another body type in a very negative light. And by constantly showing that drama after drama, film after film, repeatedly, we cement that prototype. So do you think that, my question to you is that, do you think because media is a reflection of society, that is why we show that, because that is how society perceives it, or is this narrative being given to us by the media?
Yeah,
What do you
so I think media is a reflection of a society is an argument that's been used to death. It is true to a certain extent. Yes, you pick out your stories from all that's happening around you and then glorify it or dramatize it. But at the same time, this is a tool for change. And this, our media, every medium, चाहे वो film हो, TV हो, social media हो, it's a tool to change how our masses think, and it's the most effective tool. The whole origins of television is propaganda, so that was the means of bringing this whole medium about. So why are we constantly, just badgering the same thing? Although I have to say that as of in recent past and also in my career over like 12, 15 years, progressively, you know, we have taken stances, some actors, but some directors also have taken stances to break the glass ceiling, to come out of that. But still today, if you ask or if you just observe any actor or actress, you will see that they are more focused on fitting that profile rather than, like, have you ever heard of anyone in our industry who's going out of their way to just kind of let their bodies be to fit into a role that exemplifies, like a regular girl in our, नहीं ना, रेगुलर गर्ल भी अगर प्ले कर रहे हैं तो हमें लीन होना है, हमें वी हैव टू फिट इट ताकि हमें फिल्म मिले जिसमें हम हीरोइन हो. सो it's a vicious cycle, and we're very inspired by Bollywood. We're very inspired by our neighboring country, and a lot of that influence comes from there. Because if we were to kind of just focus on our own grounds and realities, I think I think a lot of these stereotypes and us running behind a certain image would shed off, much like Irani cinemas, or a lot of what what alternative cinema in Hollywood is doing. But yes, it is. You're absolutely right. There are exceptions, but we need more of these exceptions. And I think we are headed in that direction, but it will take our lifetime. It will. Yeah. So I have to say regarding milk, it kind of triggered me at a deeper level also now, because I have a 5 year old, and I'm now at a point where I'm like thinking of the right time to introduce certain things to her. And this totally, because this is what we do. We're like, as mothers now, now you can, like Kamal said, empathize. Now you can empathize with your own mothers also, and with that generation who passed on these things without really going deeper, like saying ke doodh pio, it's going to make you healthy, it's going to make you stronger, all the taglines of all the ads that you see, and it's ingrained in us too. So when we are saying to our kids, it comes. But we unfortunately, we do have a heightened sense of awareness, but unfortunately we have a whole genetic DNA and social conditioning that we have grown up with too. So it was a tearjerker for me, because I was like, oh my god, which of this am I doing, and which of this should I be mindful of, So it's so relevant, such a good film. And I saw that you produced it, Jamina, so kudos, bravo. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting that you're saying that because, yeah, that what are the values, or are we preparing the next generation? It makes me think, like she says in that milk has made me tall but not strong enough, to face. And I wanted to ask uh, Vimal and Bemisal, but Bemisal, I'll ask you first that since you talk a lot about body image, and you talk about a lot of these issues on social media. First, I wanted to ask you that what made you start, speaking about all these issues, and how do you think today with social media, how do you think that affects a woman's self-image?
So, body image is something that is so, so close to my heart. Like, my entire bachelor's thesis was just made to reflect that. And there's so many components as to why we're so obsessed with this. I don't think anybody can tell me right now that they aren't obsessed with it, whether you choose to be part of that or not. As for social media, so I've been talking about this for a very, very long time before I even realized what it actually was.
because I've gone through it so much my entire life. Since I was a kid, I was an early developer. Early, I had body parts that suddenly were now sexualized, even though to me it was just a body. When social media kind of came up, I had never really planned to talk about it so much, but I realized when I started kind of talking about my own stuff, there were mothers, there were like grandmoms, there were like little kids, teenagers just messaging in and pouring in, telling me their stories and how just by seeing me, I guess it helped. And that was so important for me because I've seen women like me who look like me nowhere here, unfortunately. I don't think I can say that there was even a single woman that looked like me who I wanted to be like, at least like look appearance wise. And I think that's so important, representation. It is really hard because just recently it's so interesting that all of these are coming together because we just had the Kadi shoot
Yeah,
and
I saw
the
that.
the incredible backlash and negativity that I've had to face over the past 3 weeks made me want to just quit. I was this close to, yeah, just deactivating my account. It was so bad because I don't think that people realize um how easily they can pass a comment at just someone just like that. And the comparison I found really interesting was the fact that, there was Rubab, obviously Iman, Zara, all of them. I love them so much. And they wouldn't have, like, the comments underneath their pictures were like, price kya hai? Right, is जोड़े में और कोई color? And under mine, there were more than like 300, 400 comments on just my body, on what I look like. And I found that so interesting because I was like, why? You know what I mean? I mean, I get it. It's new. I guess maybe people haven't seen it yet. But it's just so interesting how obsessed we are constantly about how people look. And social media, even though sometimes it does make you feel bad, of course, like for me personally, filters are a big trigger because every time I see my face being slimmed down to fit the standard, which is considered beautiful, really, really gets to me. It's so triggering every time. So I just kind of told myself I'm just not going to use these anymore. But at the same time, I think it's also helped me a lot because there's so many women I've connected to all over the world that fight for the same things that I fight for, or fight for things similar to what all of you amazing women fight for as well. And I think that's really changed my perspective. So that's what I'd have to say about that. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I totally, that's really interesting because in one place I've always felt that with social media that in one place it's like diversity and, suddenly you're sitting here in Pakistan and you just see people from everywhere. At the same time, it's that constant comparison also on the same platform. Rimal, I wanted to ask you that since even Amna mentioned this, that now that she's a mother, and it's like, what values are we giving our children, and and it should be more about just the appearance. In our society, there is so much emphasis on physical beauty and you know strength, physical strength, as compared to emotional well-being and strength of character. How do you think that we can, educate or sensitize the masses, or how do you think we can change that mindset?
Thank you, Yamina. I'd like to start by talking about the elephant in the room about within the poem, which was about the sexual violence that she faced. Which of course, body image is so important and it's linked to so many things. And I think that part of the reason why Elsa's poem is so powerful is because it milk as a concept sort of represents the system and the society that we're all a part of. And there are, systems in place, there are power structures in place that force women to emphasize and focus on their physical beauty, even when, milk is technically supposed to make us stronger, but the reasons that her mother cites is about making her legs longer, making her fairer, making her hair smooth as silk. And it sort of boils down to this idea that milk is also this purity, right? Milk in many cultures is supposed to be fertility and purity. And so I find milk as a concept to be such an it is milk is political, right?
Mm.
But when it comes to the power structures that we're all a part of, dismantling them is not the job of the victim. It's not the onus on girls to actually sit down and figure out a way on how, there's this, I've been reading, whenever you hear about sexual assault, you hear, or sexual harassment, it'll be about how women face this. It's not, that's not right. The narrative and the discourse around it needs to change to women, that somebody sexually assaulted a woman. The action needs to go back, and the onus and the burden needs to be shifted back to the perpetrator. So, it's changes within our own vocabulary that I think need to be prioritized. And in what we teach girls, Amna, your daughter is so incredibly lucky to have you as a guide to be able to talk to her, who's actually taking into consideration her age and the triggers and the way that this should actually be talked about. But this is not a luxury that some girls have, and it's certainly not a luxury that little girls who have no idea what's happening to them, but it happens to them. And so this sensitization of girls is what's always talked about. But why don't we ever talk about how we raise our boys? Why don't we ever talk about the responsibility about how we raise boys and what they're supposed to do? If Amna can take why are mothers taking more care of how their girls are raised? That reality needs to change. It's not a boys will be boys kind of world anymore. It shouldn't be. They should be held accountable for their actions. So once that shift in our thinking takes place, which of course, poetry, art, public advocacy, all the incredible work that everybody in this in the Zoom room are doing, these are all steps towards that.
Yeah, it's it's so interesting because, like you said, that why don't we raise our boys differently? And women are raised in a way at the end, like even through Kaval's show, I was watching this episode in which a woman said that she was rejected 40 times, of course, rejected by men 40 times because of the color of her skin. So at the end of it, it's like I feel even body image and all this emphasis on physical beauty is so that you can get a good rishta, bear children, and facilitate the man, which has to change. And this, we're going to see this in our next poem, which is called Aakhri Qatar Mein Gaya Hua Geet, song sung from the last row by Anjum Tanveer. And then we'll come back.
नज़्म पेश कर रही हूँ आखिरी कतार में गाया हुआ गीत। थकन मेरी हकीकत है, नींद मेरी ज़रूरत है, तुम्हारी ख्वाहिश मेरी मजबूरी है। हकीकत को तस्लीम करने से पहले, ज़रूरत को पूरा करने से पहले, मजबूरी को ज़ेर करने से पहले, मेरे पास एक मसरूफ़ दिन और थोड़ी सी नींद के दरमियान एक छोटा सा वक्फ़ा है, और तुम्हारे ख़याल से एक तवील मकालमा। मेरी ज़िंदगी में जितना वक्त है वो इस मकालमे को पूरा करने के लिए कम है। तुम्हारी ज़िंदगी में जितना वक्त है वो मेरे इंतज़ार के लिए बहुत ज़्यादा है। मेरे पास जितनी फुतूहात हैं उनसे दिल की सल्तनत भी नहीं बनाई जा सकती। तुम्हारे पास जितनी ताकत है उससे तुम्हारे नाम पर एक शहर बसाया जा सकता है। मैं अपनी हकीकत को तस्लीम कर लूँगी, अपनी ज़रूरत को पूरा कर लूँगी, अपनी मजबूरी को ज़ेर कर लूँगी, और जब तुम्हारे नाम पर बसने वाले शहर में कोई जश्न मनाया जाएगा, मैं एक हुजूम की आखिरी कतार में खड़े होकर बहुत से लोगों के साथ एक गीत गाऊंगी जो जश्न के दूसरे दिन भुला दिया जाएगा।
So, yeah, again in this poem, does anyone want to say anything about that? Or it's so common, it's such a common story of the women in our society, how a lot of the women have to negate themselves just in order to build the man and to facilitate him and never take credit for it.
If I can come in, Yamina,
Sure.
this is, as you said, this is a very common story, and it's also the what's out there in the public and what the narratives that are fed to us. But I think that women in Pakistan don't realize how much that how much they're actually doing by default. So I can speak from a human rights perspective, which is that one of the largest human rights movement, in fact, all the largest human rights movements in this country are being led by women. And more often than not, of course, Aurat March is the obvious example, but there are women that are fronting the fight for human rights that has happened, but that they're kind of forced, these roles are forced upon them because the men in their families are the ones that have been taken away, or they're the ones that they have to fight for. And so these women have to take on these uncomfortable roles that no amount of milk has actually prepared them for, no amount of they've been made beautiful but they're not made strong. All of these women are actually leading these charges, and it's high time. We've spoken about whether or not the media reflects the society or does the society reflect the media, but the fact is that these stories are not in the media. These stories are not actually being talked about. This strength is not front and center. And once you can't be what you can't see. And so these while I understand, of course, there are women, we are still very, we're still so disadvantaged. We're completely in shackles when it comes to deciding the course of our destiny. But in many ways, it's actually something that we have to remember, that a lot of us are already doing it. A lot of
Right.
women, single women, are already they're raising children themselves. It takes a village to raise a well brought up man, sure, but a lot of this is already happening. So this is just something that I think needs more space in public discourse.
I totally agree with you, and I do feel that, just like you said, that so many people are standing up for themselves, and even just by living their life, like you said, just by living their life, um, they are, they're very strong and resilient, but we don't see that. And why do you think that is? Why is it that, again, like, even, I mean,
I
Amna,
can
if you talk
tell.
about media, yeah, why do we not see more of this?
Well, I just 2 cents. Um, I feel like for example, one example is what Kamal is doing, right? It's bringing forward voices of those women who have personally experienced and spent a lot of their lives experiencing all of that. And that's a huge step forward. And I think because Hamare यहाँ entertainment is big, TV is big, the two forms of entertainment, food and TV or films, I think uh, content like this needs to be taken on a massive scale. And so producers or other people who are in more power positions need to tap into content like this and bring it up in in places where you see it at the mass level, not just
In
niche,
mainstream.
mainstream level, yeah. And हमारे यहाँ होता है. I keep saying there are gems. It's not like we're not completely in the dark here. There are gems out there, but it needs to be done more. And we need to see, like Rimmel said, that the amount of work, the amount of contribution a woman makes, needs to it's done, it's there, everybody knows, but it's not glorified in cinemas, it's not seen in on TV, in our ads also. I feel like slowly we're getting there, like lately in the last few years. I haven't done drama serials recently, but the ad campaigns that I've been a part of have been very progressive, and big brands are taking. I know they have their own motives, no doubt, but they're taking on subjects like body image and going beyond physical beauty, but they're taking it on and at a mass scale. So यही चीज़ अगर आपके और ज़्यादा उसको आप entertainment package कर दें, but your content needs to be inspired by stories that Kamal is putting forward. That's an example. That's a very big example. I feel like someone needs to just kind of like take it bigger, and inspire our girls and our boys. And the same thing needs to be done equally for the opposite sex. You guys have completely nailed it when you say that we need to have mothers taking responsibility, mothers and fathers taking responsibility to raise their boys a certain way. And this needs to be done at a education level, like school maybe. It needs to be really like put into our schooling system. What are etiquettes for a boy? A boy needs to know his own body image. He needs to know a girl's body image. Nothing should be a surprise to them. They should know what periods are. They should know what orgasms are for women. I mean, boys need to grow up with this and be sensitized. So, yes, media and education, I feel, are the tools to ram it in.
Pavel, do you want to add something to that since
Thank you so much, Amna, for acknowledging my work. I mean, I was almost about to like literally start crying because it just, when you said that, this needs to reach more people. I'm on my third season right now, and that means that I've produced over almost 30 episodes or more to date. And even though the first season took me 3 years to make and nobody wanted to support it or fund it, and I mean, we're in the media, we know how expensive good quality production is. When I finally got the Facebook grant, I was able to make the first season, and it was just like all over the place. Each episode was getting over 1 million views. One girl wrote that, she got one of the videos 47 times on her WhatsApp, and it was sent by her chachas and her mamus and whatnot. So we were able to impact that generation of men. They were watching and they were sharing on their WhatsApp. But every time after that, when I've pitched my show to media houses, to producing partners, to brands, मैं literally laptops लेके I've gone from office to office in Kareem's. I've stood in the waiting room, although like I thought that now I've reached that position, like Facebook consults with me when they're creating a product, so maybe people will take me seriously. BBC follows up with my guests and invites them on their show. Maybe people will take my show seriously. But I've stood there in the waiting rooms. I've gotten rejection letters after 2 months of pitching to a brand. And at the meeting, the brand is like, oh, amazing. This is what our core mission is around the world. And, we want to take this forward with you. And you're doing such a brilliant job. And blah, blah, blah. And then you go home, you make the presentation, you send the financials. 2 months later, they'll follow up and they'll be like, oh, you talk too much about, this part, and, our audience will hate us. And I'm like, no, the audience loves it. Look, there are boys who are following the show. There are men who are following the show. I remember this one time, there's a huge bank and they released a product for women. So I was like, oh, there's my fit. I should go to them. Banks have a lot of money too. So this is like peanuts for them. I went up to them, I pitched the show. Yeah, I love your work, but Kaval, if we sponsor you, men will start with, withdrawing their accounts with us. They'll think we're out to get them. And I was like, no, they love it. So this season was crowdfunded by my audience. What I was not able to achieve in 8 months after pitching to brands, my audience raised in less than 6 days. And even though this money is peanuts again, and I'm not going to take a salary, I might not be able to make a salary till we reach like season 10 or something, it's fine. this is building something bigger, right? Like the fact that you acknowledged it, for me, that's such a big deal because you're someone in the media for years, you're in the mainstream media and you watched it and you knew you, because you can understand from your lens the impact of this content. So I think that every win is a win. And you're right, there are gems out there. There's so many content creators out there who are doing things in their little spaces. They just need to be empowered by bigger people and by bigger backing to be able to reach the masses. I mean, we're all full of ideas, we're all full of life. We just need to be backed. And that's literally it.
Yeah. Bimasal, do you want to add anything to that? Or
Well, yeah, I don't know if
I
you
mean,
guys saw or not, but I got extremely emotional watching that one. It it's just crazy to me because, I mean, the only two women that kind of run through my head are my mom, because my mom's a single parent, and my grandma. And it just makes me relive those stories almost every single day, every time I talk about something. It's like they're just at the back of my mind. Like, I would never want that to happen to any woman, whether I knew her personally or not. It's just any person, any human being. Um, and so I kind of want to bring up these three categories that I created in the thesis, which were, so it's called Pigs, Cows, and Gluttons, our obsession with body image. And the reason for picking these three adjectives for just people, but specifically uh, bigger bodies, is that I have not seen someone who looks like me represented in a positive light in the media, in Pakistan at least. I think when I look at it, it's either it's comic, it's comedy because somehow it's funny, or it's overtly sexualized. And there is no balance there. And I feel so erased every single day. Um, Not that there aren't brands that aren't working towards that. Of course they are, and of course there is way more room for growth. But the fact is that we categorize people, and like Rimmel said, there is a system in place. There's a system in place to purposely put people in boxes to keep them away, to not show them because we're so offended by their existences. And this could be anybody who's falling out of the norm. It doesn't necessarily have to be bigger bodies. It can be people with darker skin, or differently able people, really just anyone. And being erased is, I think, one of the worst things that we do to individuals in our society, because we're ridding ourselves also of just growth in general, just of diversity and humanity. And it's just sorry, it's super
yeah,
super
no.
for me. But yeah, I mean, it we have a lot of work to do. Yeah, especially just because I've always just kind of talked about bigger bodies because, I live it. That's my everyday life. I've just realized that my intelligence has been questioned because of how I look, my
Mm.
capability, or what skill set I have because of how I look. And I think that's completely ridiculous. And for Kanwal, I mean, to think that you have this work that's in impacted like what millions of people, and yet these big corporations are just pushing you aside, is because of these set boundaries that we've already created. But honestly, I'm so in awe of all of you for breaking these barriers every single day, and I hope that we do continue to do that.
But now I'm going to shift to our next poem, taking this forward. How women are, we rather than supporting, we condemn or blame the victim. So, talking about this, I'm going to show the next poetry film, which is titled Girl Cries Wolf by Yusra Amjad.
Girl cries wolf, and no one comes running. Girl cries wolf, and the townsfolk scratch their heads. Girl cries wolf and the doctor asks if the wolf has fangs. Girl cries wolf and the professor asks if she has tried closing her eyes. Maybe if you do not see the wolf will not see you back. Girl cries wolf and someone asks if she's sure it's not a puppy. Girl cries wolf and all the pitchforks are off duty. Girl cries wolf and the lunch lady asks why she fled. Girl cries wolf and the sheriff asks why she fought. When you gaze long into the wolf also gazes back. Girl cries wolf and the librarian reminds her there are dragons in the next town. Girl cries wolf and the postman asks if she has tried stroking it. Girl cries wolf and the butcher asks if she has tried feeding it one of her limbs. Girl cries wolf and the mayor says it's a shame she and the wolf don't get along anymore. That he remembers when the wolf and her used to be friends. Girl cries wolf and is asked if she's been bitten. Girl says yes and is asked if she's been dismembered. Girl says yes and is asked if she's been devoured. What kind of town would we be if we banish our wolves? Who will keep our girls out of the woods? Who will teach our girls to bleed patient? Who will teach our girls about sacrifice? How will they know the world is not safe if we do not teach them that even the town is not safe, that even a wolf deserves a home, a roof over his head, a place at the table, and a girl to eat?
Yeah. So in this poem, of course, it's how, we always blame the victim. And I thought, Rimal, I'll start with you. What are your views on victim blaming, and do you think that the onus is always put on the woman?
How much time do you have? Um, uh, this is such a huge problem because, again, it's as Bemisal pointed out, it's a system. And in Pakistan, we've seen how that system plays out for even a woman of remarkable clout and privilege. And it's very clear that the laws are not on your side, that the courts are not on your side, that the media is not on your side, that whoever controls the purse strings controls the narrative. And it is baffling that it is a problem right at the top and it goes down to the person in your home. And it again goes to speak of the person that we center these stories around, which is always what was she wearing? Where was she? What did she do to encourage him? What did she do? When we speak about her sleeping her way to the top, it's not about the bosses that are sexually exploiting her. It's not about that. It's about how she's a slut. And so this is it's a multi-layered issue that an entire system is upheld by. And it's remarkable that the pushback in Pakistan from women against this kind of thinking, I feel like, is taking root. It's not supposed to be an easy fight, and it's not going to be an easy fight. And so this Bemisal, you were speaking about the commentary under your photographs, your beautiful photographs. And I think that you're the first one to charge through, and so you're going to get hurt. But look at what you're leaving. But look at the opening that you're doing. Look at the kind of doors that you're opening for somebody else like you. So I think that this what is encouraging is that I do see a shift, at least online, where perpetrators of sexual harassment and sexual violence in this country are becoming toxic, which is not something that has happened. I'm not saying that their careers have been ruined, and I think that they might come back after a couple of years of being silent. But the fact is that we have managed to do something, which is make him toxic enough that a lot of people don't want to work with him anymore. So that's something that I think we should all, you know,
Yeah. You
Yeah,
know,
so if I can
yes, yes,
just a little
please.
point that's coming in my mind is that I think we also need to see a lot more uh, masculine representation of what's right. You know, um, they're very few, and they're so few that they get lost in the noise. I feel like, fathers, brothers, sons, they really need to step up and just kind of, just make the same sounds that we're trying to get to. And I think that will make a huge difference, because when a son or when a little boy sees an older man talking the talk that will bring about change, um, it becomes the younger one's talk, you know. So we need a lot of male representation in this whole campaign, so to speak, or fight, so to speak.
Yeah, I
Can I
believe
also
that.
add something?
Yeah.
Is it okay if I speak?
Yeah, Kaval, of course, yes.
Yeah. I just wanted to say, I wrote a few pointers down while the poem was going. It affected me emotionally at like a very, very strong level because so for the last 8 years that I've had Soul Sisters Pakistan, there have been people who entered the community with extremely problematic views, and I've seen them change over time. So initially, if some girl would write about, oh, this happened to me on the street and, I felt so uncomfortable, girl cries wolf when no one came running, and someone asks if she was sure it wasn't just a puppy. This would
Yeah.
happen. There would be that one or two, older lady who would be like, Beta, are you sure that he wasn't just doing something else? He wasn't calling out to you? Or maybe this is just the culture that they like to call girl baby, baby when she's walking.
Oh,
Now I see those same women. They've changed. They're the first ones. If they see an article, they'll be the first ones to post and be like, this is not right. Ye kya ho raha hai? How do we change this? How do we empower our girls? And I see this. This is a process. Like, this is unlearning is also a process, and it's something we should be proud of as well. And I think we don't talk about that enough. I also feel like when the Me Too movement took rise in Pakistan a couple of years ago, that really helped us like within this closed Facebook community as well to speak up even more. So I remember as soon as that specific incident happened that we're talking about, I posted on the group because I wanted people to understand how historic and important this moment was, and that we all needed to be up there with with our guards. And I asked that let's understand the Me Too movement. How many of you can say that you've never felt uncomfortable walking on the street or sitting in a room filled with men? That's what the Me Too movement is. And 98% of the women there said that I've been stared at, I've been catcalled, I've been harassed. I said, you're part of the Me Too movement. Don't discredit it. You're part of us. This was my way of making them understand that, look, this is not an isolated incident. It's not just something that's very extreme that's going to happen. This is part of all of us. We're all in it together. And today we fight for the tomorrow that we want to see. So I just feel like, this poem that we just heard, it needs to reach everyone because it's every girl's story out there.
yes.
And it's so huge that you're saying that they're elderly ladies who have changed mindsets over time. So if we can target our younger ones who just grow up with that mindset, that's where the change lies. And
And
that's
that's
so
the whole
reassuring to hear.
Exactly, and that's what dialogue does. It creates change. Constantly having a conversation. First, people are going to fight. They're going to fight some more. They're going to leave. They're going to hate the group. Then they'll come back and they'll be like, okay, wait, like, we just want to say, so we came back and we want to discuss this a little bit more and maybe we understand. So there's a lot of that, but it's okay because at the end, we all realize that, oh, we're growing and we're unlearning and we're becoming part of like a bigger cause. So.
Amna, I also wanted to ask you that again, media these days, do you feel that we kind of glorify the abuser? And if we also, like through dialogue and all of this, we bring about a change, but our narrative has to change. There's so many dramas in which they're like, oh, it's Beauty and the Beast, but it's much more than that, which we're constantly, that's the narrative we're giving. That
Yeah,
could change our.
you're absolutely right. I mean, recently, I have to be honest, I have detached myself from TV
Okay.
so much so that, that I feel like I was never connected.
Wow.
So, yeah, so much so. Completely different life pace at the moment. So, but yes, during the time when it was all around me, yes, that glorification was almost necessary. The content creators felt was absolutely necessary to get the ratings in, to put a certain kind of music, to give a certain kind of, इसको और करें, इसको ज़रा और, इसको amp करें, आप ज़रा ज़्यादा रोएं, आप ज़रा ज़्यादा उसको ज़रा कस के मारें, things like that, and they're done. And it's to sensationalize, to dramatize, to hook the audience, to get the TRPs. I mean, are those that come in and they just kind of break little by little by little, um, and a
I mean,
conscientious actor and a conscientious producer director will always pick and choose. You know how it is. You kind of learn the ropes, and then you pick and choose what you want to be representing, right? So there are those out there. The mainstream overall narrative is going to sustain for some. Up to with COVID, I don't know what's gonna happen, but like generally speaking, it is gonna sustain because uh, the system, the power, the those who call the shots believe that that's what brings in the audience, right? So, but something like, let's say, I keep referring back to Kamal. We have her in front of us, and it's such an honor to be able to do that face to face. I unless and until we bring these things, the real content is tarha ka, at a level where it hooks people, and it gives by packaging it in a way that they are used to, in a way, you know what I mean? Like it has to be a very clever combination of what the reality is and where we're trying to go, which is elevation, right? And changing of mindsets, and bringing that into the package, which is used day in and day out to entertain. So there has to be a good marriage between the two for a long-term impact of change.
slowly, we need to change that
Yeah.
slowly, little by little.
So, yeah. Uh, yeah, I had one more point, but it just kind of slipped. Um, but yeah, did I answer your question?
Yes, yes.
Okay. एक और point था
Huh.
related to what Kamal said, but I'll come back.
Victim blaming again. That was good.
I don't know. It'll come.
I just want to say one thing.
Carry on.
When you talked about dramas and all of that, like what dramas depict, literally, like I write about dramas and the problems in it every day almost for the last 8 years. So, like, I'll avidly follow and I'll write about it because I know that my audience is also watching. So, someone needs to remind them that देखो अभी जो the thappad that you just saw, and then the woman going back and saying it's okay, my Janu husband, that's not okay. Okay, that's not okay. Just remember that. So often I know I piss off people in the media and then they'll like not be happy with me, but it's okay, right? Like
Yeah, it's
maybe
totally okay.
it's
Even drama.
Our dramas also, it's such a tricky format
yeah,
because those who have attempted to empower the ladies who have been victimized for 22 episodes, and then in the 23rd, 24th episode
yeah,
they're empowered. That's just such a wrong formula.
yeah,
Okay, like for 90% of the drama, you're just like uh, completely doing what you've said, and then last do mein aap
1 second.
she gets the reward of all that sacrifice and all that. And I remembered the point that I forgot. So the point is that I've learned over time and with age that we need to take a route of inclusion rather than resistance. And something that Kamal said to the extent के वो ख़वातीन थी उन्होंने backlash दिया pushback किया वो group छोड़ के चले गई and later they came back and you let them in, you know, and because you have a greater goal in mind. And so that is the way change comes about. You have to have foresight and you have to have the ability to take that pushback yet keep yourself open to inclusion and forgive, and you know, just kind of keep the dialogue going rather than resisting. I feel like in our journey of feminism कह लें या patriarchal society के against कह लें, sometimes we take as like all women folk, sometimes we take it in a way that actually creates more divide rather than inclusion. And unfortunately, it sometimes takes us a couple of steps back. And the only way to really bring about change is if we have the tolerance and the patience to face the pushback and still let them in because we are convinced that they will change.
And I also want to just say, thank you, Amna, for appreciating that. And for me as well, that was a learning ladder or whatever it's called. I wasn't that maybe forgiving in the beginning, but I learned
Yeah.
that my mission is bigger than like just being friends with me or whatever. No, it's not about that. So I unlearned, and it's okay to say that I made mistakes along the way, because now we're at a place where there's more inclusion, there's more people coming back, there's more conversations that are happening, and that's exactly how it should be. What you said, we need to not be divisive and play our parts in understanding that we're all in it for a bigger cause.
Yeah.
I just wanted to interject if that's okay. I think Rimmel said or Amna said that the responsibility to change the perspective or to, you know, take over the future, I guess, isn't always just our responsibility, I feel. And I think all of this kind of comes back to that. Because we're going through it, so we have to be in the forefront. A lot of times when I've been triggered or been, you know, just had a really bad time on social media, so I will get messages literally looking, नहीं तुम नहीं करोगी तो और कौन करेगा, which is great and all, but then the responsibility, the pressure, the toll that it takes on your mental health, all of our mental health, it's not easy being human. And I think you have to check in with yourself, have a dialogue with yourself as well. But coming back to the whole dialogue thing, it's so important just in every sort of. So you're talking about film and stuff. To be honest, and I'm going to be very, very brutally honest here. I don't watch Pakistani films or stuff except for Cake. That is one of my favorites. It was relatable to me. And you know, I mean, I would watch like ये जो Netflix पे Bollywood की चीजें निकल रही हैं more because that's more me. I'm represented. I see people like me, you know. So conversations to, I think, the youth, and in that I would bring up education. It's so important. Our educational facilities and institutions are so set back in their ways. They're so ancient in the way that they think that we are taught from very early ages in school to hate one another. Automatically judge her because, you know, या तो उसके कपड़े नहीं ठीक या तो वो उसका boyfriend है या वो इस तरह, you know what I mean? So it's, we think that they're tiny things, but they're really not, because when you grow up you have this sort of set standard, and I think all of us have been through that. And I think what Kanwal said about unlearning is, it's so huge because it's not easy. I think I myself probably unlearned so many toxic things that I learned over the course of God knows how many years in the past like 3 years. I went to be in United Liberal Arts, and you know, just realizing that you don't just, the first thing, so I think one thing that I learned as well was that the first thought that crosses your mind when you look at someone is what society's told you, and the second thought that comes in is actually what you think, right? So the first thing, you might judge someone just immediately because we're taught to do that. And I think it's so important when you're having a dialogue with yourself, just be a bit introspective, I guess, is to think, why do I think like this? And I think that's what Kanwal is doing through all of her work, is that you're talking. It's so important to just communicate. And that's something that I constantly talk about. कि आपको नहीं समझ आती, आप पूछ लो. कुछ नहीं होता. And so many times I've been wrong about race or anything, whatever I've learned. I wasn't born with all of these things in my head, you know? You have to learn. You make mistakes. Sometimes you look like the biggest idiot in the room, but it's okay if the end result is that you've learned and you're trying to be better, I think.
No, I totally get that also. I mean, there's so much that we've talked about, but what I also hope that we can inculcate in people is also realize our self worth and look inward and stop seeking for validation from other people, you know, and because I feel at the end we are more than just our bodies, and we should, on this note, stand strong and unapologetic. And I will now end this panel discussion with Kishwar Nahid's iconic poem, Hum Gunegar Orte, We the Sinful Women.
ये हम गुनाहगार औरतें हैं जो अहले जुब्बा की तमकनत से न रोब खाएं, न जान बेचें, न सर झुकाएं, न हाथ जोड़ें। ये हम गुनाहगार औरतें हैं कि जिनके जिस्मों की फसल बेचें जो लोग वो सरफराज ठहरे, नियाबत इम्तियाज ठहरे, वो दावर अहले साज ठहरे। ये हम गुनाहगार औरतें हैं कि सच का परचम उठा के निकले तो झूठ से इशाराएं अटी मिले हैं। जो बोल सकती थी वो जुबानें कटी मिले हैं। हर एक दहलीज पे सजाओं की दास्तानें रखी मिले हैं। ये हम गुनाहगार औरतें हैं कि अब ताक़ुब में रात भी आए तो ये आंखें नहीं बुझेंगी कि अब जो दीवार गिर चुकी है उसे उठाने की जिद न करना। ये हम गुनाहगार औरतें हैं जो अहले जुब्बा की तमकनत से न रोब खाएं, न जान बेचें, न सर झुकाएं, न हाथ जोड़ें।
So the panel discussion comes to an end.
हम सब
And
गुनहगार औरतें हैं।
it's true. But before I end this, I would like to thank British Council for supporting us, and also a shout out to Emma Brierley for the beautiful animation and Haley Beavis for the music, and my four guests. Thank you so much for being part of this conversation. Thank you for talking so openly, and I hope we can this can be our little contribution in shifting the narrative. Thank you.
Thank you for having us. Thank you so
Thank you
much.
for having us.